All right, so this is the podcast, the dark podcast. When you gaze into the abyss gazes back into you. When the abyss gazes back into you, you gaze back into the abyss. Whatever's within the darkness shines within the light. All right, so Stranger Things, read the screen. Stranger Things, Will and 11. Okay, so Will and 11 could easily be identified as hypersensitives, as well as OCD, and then there's autism, dyslexia, dyscalculia, and then there's also other forms of that one too, schizophrenia. And these all seem to have certain concentrations of one or more of those things referred to as gamma radiation, melatonin, DMT, and gray matter, and hypersensitivity, which is in the DSM, which in DSM-5 is also, they refer to hypersensitivity as a disorder. Why would they do that? Because the person is hyper aware of their senses? What kind of asshole does that? Wait, didn't you say that PTSD also has hypersensitivity, which is why they're very sensitive to being triggered? And they're also like paranoid too? Wait, isn't there a form of CPTSD? I mean, a form of PTSD that does that? That like has all of those things that you just mentioned? Isn't it known as CPTSD? Yes, exactly. Chronic PTSD, a consistent pattern of PTSD with nonstop that doesn't, without break, without diminishing. And what does it do? It creates a higher concentration of gray matter, hypersensitivity, hyperawareness, DMT, and gamma radiation within the brain. Not only after it's healed, but before that, and as well as within the process of such, because of how much the neurons, and which are within all of the organs, which are, what are they truly called again, Samantha? Organ grids, yes, exactly. And that is what allows the genetics, which are the psychological abilities, to be activated due to the higher concentration of, what do you think it's called? Chemicals? Stimuli. There you go. Stimuli. So what are psychological abilities? Higher concentration of stimuli within the brains, which is also what, Samantha, you said, the heart, the gut. The gut has even more neurons than the brain. I mean, within the skull. Oh gosh. So doesn't that mean that intuition is basically an indication of psychic abilities? Yeah, I mean, that makes sense, Samantha, but what do you call that in science? Bobby? Oh, you said pattern recognition. Okay, pattern recognition. Great. So pattern recognition, but how do they know, like, what's going on? Hyper awareness, because they would have to sense their abilities, which comes from the neurons. Okay, within the senses. Okay, the sensory system. Okay, within the vessel. Okay, what mortals refer to as their bodies, and that's how they have spiritual gifts, psychic ability. Yes, Bobby, psychic abilities. That's also true, Samantha. Spiritual gifts, and those gifts are genetic codes that are unlocked through traumatic experiences, but it could be latent if not triggered. Yes, Samantha, if not triggered. That's true, Bobby. It could be latent. Yes, that's true. So what is it that 11 and Will has in common? Traumatic. Okay, traumatic. What mortals refer to as traumatic experiences. Exactly. Which is a traumatic expression, which is a gene expression. Exactly. So when you rewrite the genes, you activate the abilities, but you also are more aware of your psychological state of mind. Yes, exactly, Bobby. That is so true, Samantha. That is true. But what else is there? That means that the ones with the psychic abilities are the neurodivergence mentioned, as well as the ones that are, subcategories as well as because there's spectrum, so there's different kinds of them. They're not all the same. And the ones that have both, and they have a stronger connection. Okay, they have a stronger connection and hyper awareness. Okay, cool. It's heightened. Okay, cool. And they might have extrasensory abilities. Yes. No, they do. They're just not using it. Got it. Okay. So what else is there? Why do you not see this occurring constantly outside in the open within society? Well, most people don't believe, but it's not just that. What could it be? Okay, guys, pay attention. Remember, they kidnapped the girl because she indicated to have abilities that her mother had. How did they know that she would have it, though? Well, her mother met a criteria. What was the criteria? The spectrum? A spectrum. Okay. Doesn't spectrum have something to do with light spectrum, though? I mean, what do you guys think? Samantha and Bobby? Okay, Jake. Well, you mentioned the light spectrum. That's okay. Yeah, I did mention the light. What do you think it has to do with the spectrum, the criteria for these abilities, these psychic intuitives? I mean, wouldn't the light spectrum have something to do with the gamma radiation? Because they glow and shit. So they probably just found out that they had a higher concentration of light matter. I mean, which is dark photon radiation energy within their spirits. Okay, which is their aura. Yeah, exactly, Bobby. And that is how they found out that she was a candidate for the study, the experiments. That's how they picked her. Okay. Because why didn't they just pick someone else? Oh, so it wasn't random, Bobby. Exactly. Jake is right. Jake, that's exactly true, Jake. Bobby, that was a great insight, actually. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So that means they're kidnapping them. The ones that are kidnapped, they're often neurodivergent females, kids, babies, prison to street pipeline, school to prison pipeline, orphan to street pipeline, street to trafficking pipeline, orphan to trafficking pipeline. Okay. Prison to trafficking pipeline. So they're getting them through the system. Was that Jake? Okay, Jake, they're getting them through, okay. And they're hiding them so the public doesn't know. Okay, Samantha, what the public doesn't know? Okay, why would they? So why doesn't the public know? Because they're hiding them. Okay, so if they're hiding them and they're doing experiments on them, okay, Bobby, they're doing experiments on them underground to do what? To unlock their what? Their abilities, Jake. Yes, exactly, their abilities. And use them. Yeah, that's true, Bobby. But for what though? In experiments. Okay, in experiments for the government. Was that you, Samantha? No, that was Bobby? Okay, cool. Bobby, okay, cool. That's great. So if they're doing that, and then they're telling the general public what is this, Samantha? That it doesn't exist. So that they don't believe. And they're leaving neurotypicals, the most common, okay, the general public of neurodivergence out of it. Is that you, Hammett? Oh, that was you, Bobby? Okay, cool. Okay, so if they're doing that, so that means neurodivergence are, what is this, Samantha? Excessive. Okay, so if neurodivergence are excessive, but they're hiding them underground, yeah, okay, Bobby. Oh, that was you, Jake? Okay, cool. That would mean that there's a higher concentration of neurodivergence that are hidden. Is that you, Jake? Okay, cool. And Samantha? No, that was just Jake? Okay. Underground. Okay, got it. And in government facilities. Is that you, Samantha? Exactly, that's true. That's so true. And the GOV is hiding them from the general public. Okay, that was you, Jake, Samantha, and Bobby? Or just Bobby and Jake? Bobby and Jake, that is so true. Exactly. That's so fucking true.